Hey guys, how's it going? It's Monday, September the 10th, and we are in our second week of the Bible in 90 days. How's it going? I know I'm getting through it. The reading is very interesting, especially Genesis. At the end of Exodus, I found the reading about the tabernacle was really cool, the way it was supposed to be built and some of the worship responsibilities there, the way worship was supposed to be conducted, but that was really cool. But as you can see, it's about 9:30. Got the coffee, got the notepad, and today I actually did my reading on my cell phone instead of in Big Blue, my Bible. And the reason why I did it on the cell phone was just to try it out, just for a little change of pace. And I sat down with a cup of coffee and actually was able to pull up the entire passage on BibleGateway.com and just thumb through and read it. And it was a great way to kind of get a change of pace there as I was reading today. But we're in Leviticus. And before we talk about Leviticus, I'd like to just talk about a couple of questions that we've gotten about the reading from last week that I think will probably help us introduce what Leviticus is all about. I'm going to read you a question here that we received, and it's a very interesting one. I'm sure one that crossed all of your minds when you were reading the passage, and it's this. Dear Pastor Ruffin, I understand the notion of go forth and multiply, and I know the culture was different then, but I feel like I'm reading a smut novel at times. They had multiple wives. They gave their female servants to their husbands to sleep with. I've always read this, but read it in passages. When you read the Bible as a book, it's just hard for me to wrap my head around. How are these things looked on favorably by God? And the answer is they weren't. Remember, this is the redemptive story of humankind, and that's the very beginning. And after the Abrahamic covenant, and as we get into Leviticus, Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus, you see the advent of the Ten Commandments, and God is bringing some structure and some rules to the society there, and it's for the benefit of everyone. So no, I don't believe God did approve of that behavior, and it does read kind of a little crazy there, especially the way the sexuality was interacting in Genesis and a little bit of Exodus. So as we continue to read, we'll see God's story, God's redemptive story unfold, and God put some rules for society into place that are going to counteract that. Another question that we received, a very interesting one, was this. What about the plagues? There were plagues that said that one of the plagues, all the livestock in Egypt and the Egyptian army died. And then a little while later it says that all the livestock got boils. So what's up with that? And here's what happened. The plagues occurred over a period of time, over a series of months. When you read them in the scriptures, it kind of seems like they fell right on top of each other, but they didn't. And there was plenty of time after the livestock died. I think the most plausible explanation from one of the commentaries I read was that there was plenty of time for Egypt to replenish their livestock, their horses, in time to go after the Israelites, pursue the Israelites when they were in the Exodus period after they left Egypt. So those are the answers to a couple of those questions. But as we get to Leviticus, what do we think about when we get to Leviticus? And like we said, we had the Ten Commandments, and we talked about the tabernacle a little bit and how the tabernacle was built at the end of Exodus. And as we get into Leviticus, we get some very interesting rules and laws. Leviticus is primarily about the management of sin through animal sacrifice, and it's kind of gruesome at times. Some people, when you think about reading Leviticus, you might recall how to handle infectious diseases or mildew, or a mishmash of other commandments about not mixing fiber and seeds and not sleeping with your stepmother or sister or nephew or something like that. Commandments that people might deem irrelevant then, but as we've just read in Genesis and Exodus, they're very applicable to the society that they were living in there. It's interesting that when we take a look at Leviticus, it's very important in the Jewish faith. Uh, Leviticus is one of the very first books that's taught to young people growing up in the Jewish faith. It's one of the very first books that they learn how to read. It has more direct quotations from God than any other book of the Bible. As a Christians, we can't fully comprehend the language in the New Testament until we get the Leviticus vocabulary down. For example, it talks a lot about sacrifice, about atonement, about holiness, about clean and unclean, and about ceremonial and sacrificial blood. And we can't really grasp that in the New Testament until we take a look at Leviticus and understand Leviticus a little bit better. Um, it'll be really interesting as we go through Leviticus to see how you all do this. The first half of Leviticus is about atonement and sin and sacrifices. And then the second half of Leviticus is how that works out in worship, with the Levites leading worship, and how that all works out. So it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be really exciting to read and get your feedback. Please email me with any questions that you have. I'm not sure that I'll be able to answer them, but we'll figure it out together. So God bless you. Keep on keeping on. Do your reading. Remember our 3 reading tips. They were: make your time to read the scriptures and honor your time to read the scriptures. Don't get caught up in the tough passages or the passages that you disagree with or agree with or you want to make a note about. Just mark it and keep going on. And lastly, be accountable. Check in on by email or on the blog. Check in with a friend, and make sure you're keeping up with your reading. God bless you, and we'll talk to you later.